Good morning, class. So today again we are with the full fathom 5 thy father lies. I got some comments that student did not understand the text well. So I am repeating this once again. And we are initiating the journey with the introduction of the author. Shakespeare lived from 1654 to 1616. He was born in a market town 91 miles northwest of London named Stratford. Shakespeare moved to London sometime in between 1585 to 1592 after his marriage, and in London Shakespeare enjoyed the prosperity and richness. Also he enjoyed the fame. He enjoyed a successful career as a playwright, poet and actor. And in around 1613, Shakespeare took a retirement and returned back to his birthplace, Stratford. There, 3 years later, Shakespeare passed away, aged 52. In his life, Shakespeare wrote about some 39 plays, 154 sonnets, few narrative poems and other verses. Shakespeare, before writing tragedies like Hamlet and Macbeth, used to write comedies and historical plays. In his initial days, in the initial days of his career, Shakespeare wrote historical plays and comedies before writing these great tragedies. Shakespeare's heroes, especially heroes in his tragedies, are very much successful to grab the attention, to get the sympathy in spite of the terrible deeds they commit. Like Hamlet and Macbeth, both of them have committed the terrible deed, but still the characters are sympathetic. We still like these characters in spite of their terrible deeds. This is the quality of Shakespeare's character. Though they are bad, devilish, but at the same time they are very successful to grab the attention, admiration of the audience. Now Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, said that this quality of the play of both the forces was seen in Greek tragedies, and after that it's only seen in Shakespeare's tragedies. So Shakespeare is considered one of the greatest dramatists of all time. He is considered one of the most influential writer of all time. Shakespeare in his life performed, wrote various different plays. He was the part owner of the playing company named Lord Chamberlain's Men. So this is all about the author. Okay, sorry, I forget to add one more thing. Shakespeare actually brought the lyrical element to the play. Shakespeare brought the musical quality to the play. If we observe the dialogues of his characters, we don't see those dialogues sprouting from the natural need of conversation. Rather, these dialogues are very poetic, and these dialogues are, and one of the poem we are studying is one of the dialogue here. So he brought this musical, lyrical element to the play. Shakespeare mostly wrote in blank verse. Now, what is this blank verse? Blank verse comes with 10 syllables in a line, and there are 5 unstressed syllables followed by 5 stressed syllables. And these stressed syllables do not rhyme. They do not have either the internal rhyme or the end rhyme. They don't rhyme. And this style is known as blank verse, which Shakespeare mostly wrote in. Now, Shakespeare mostly wrote long plays and also wrote long narrative poems, and this style is very suitable for long narrative poems and plays. Now, this is all that we need to know about the author. Before approaching this poetry, Full Fathom 5, Thy Father Lies, we need to have the understanding of the sound significance in poetry. We need to know how poets play with the sounds in poetry. What is the relationship between sound and poetry? Now, poetry is a genre of literature, is also one of the genre. And this genre, at the heart of this genre remains musicality. When do you label some utterance to be poetic? You label some utterance to be poetic when the sounds in that utterance have been organized in a specific way, in a melodious way, with the rhyme rhythm in it, and is sonorous to the ear. So when this happens, we label the utterance to be poetic. So poetry is not just about presenting the imageries like the fiction does, like the essay does, but poetry is about presenting these ideas, imageries, in the most sonorous combination of sound possible, in the most musical, rhythmatic way possible. And now to create this musicality, to create this rhythm, to create this, to have this effect of sound in the poetry, poets uses various different sound devices. There are different varieties of sound devices. Sometimes poet repeats the similar sounding words in poetry. For example, I have been working like a dog. I would have been, I would be sleeping like a log. Here what we see is, here I have been working like a dog. I would be sleeping like a log. Here we see poet is creating the musicality, poet is creating the rhythm, poet is creating the rhyme by repeating the similar sounding words at the end of each line. We have the repetition of dog and log. This dog and log are similar sounding words. And with the repetition of this similar sounding words, poet is creating the musicality in the poetry. Poet is bestowing the musical property to the poetry. Now this type of repetition of similar sounding words, like I was running down the road trying to loosen down my load. Here road and load, the two similar sounding words are creating the rhythm, creating the rhyme in the poetry. So one of the sound device that poet uses is the rhyme. That is repetition of similar sounding words at the end of the poetry. In our poetry also what we see is, but doth suffer the sea change into something rich and strange. Change, strange, these two words are creating a rhyme in our poetry. They are the similar sounding words repeated in the two lines. Now this is one of the device at poet's disposal. Beside this, poet not only repeats the similar sounding words, sometimes poet repeats letters or a combination of letters to have this sound effect. Now for example, light, my, fire, mommy is a common dummy in Egypt. Now here we see the musicality is created, but it is not created this way with the use of rhyme. Sorry, I forgot about telling the rhyme. There are two types of rhyme. If this similar sound is repeated at the end of the line, we call it end rhyme. If the similar sound is repeated in the middle of the line, we call it internal rhyme. After this rhyme, poet not only repeats the similar sounding words, sometimes they repeat the letters or the combination of letters in words near to each other. See, here the letter and combination of letters are repeated in words near to each other. In this case, I is repeated in words near to each other. In this case, the combination of word WM is repeated in the words near to each other. Common comes with WM, sorry, mommy comes with WM, common comes with WM, dummy comes with WM. So, and again see, big, black, beer, big, black, beer, ba, ba, ba. Here what we see is the repetition of certain letters or combination of letters in words near to each other. Now, whenever you have the repetition of consonant sound, we call it consonants. When you have the repetition of consonant sound in the middle of the words near each other, we call it consonants. Now, when this consonant is repeated, but repeated at the beginning of the word, like B, 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 consonant is repeated. Consonant sound is being repeated near towards each other. But here, the consonant is repeated at the beginning of each word. Consonant is repeated as the initial letter of each word. And here, consonant is repeated, but consonant is repeated in between the words near each other. It is repeated somewhere in between the word, not in the initial position. So when consonant is repeated in between the words, we call it consonants. When the same consonant is repeated at the beginning of the words, we call it alliteration. We call it alliteration. Consonant repeated, but at the beginning of the words as the initial letter of the word. If consonant is repeated as the initial letter of the word, we call it we call it alliteration. And if this consonant is repeated, but repeated in between the words, we call it consonants. And now, when the repetition is made of the vowels. The vowel sounds are repeated in words near to each other, like hot, pot. See the repetition of O. Light my fire, light, fire. Lies, eyes. Repeat. Y is I vowel. So lies, eyes. Here also we see the repetition of a vowel sound. So whenever the repetition of vowel sound is made, we call it assonance. We call it assonance. So today we studied four sound devices. First one is rhyme. There are two types of rhyme: internal rhyme and end rhyme. When the words, similar sounding words are repeated, like dog and log, it is called rhyme. When this similar sounding words is repeated in between the line, that is internal rhyme. When this is repeated at the end of the line, this is end rhyme. Now, rhyme is one of the sound device. After that, poets also repeat letters or the combination of letters in words near each other. Now, when the repetition is made of the consonant at the beginning of the words, we call it alliteration. When this repetition of consonant is made, but not at the beginning of the word, not as the initial letter of the word, but in between the words, we call it consonants. And now when the repetition is made of the vowel sounds, we call it assonance. After this, poets have another sound device at their disposal. This sound device is called onomatopoeia. Now, what is onomatopoeia? Onomatopoeia are the words which resemble, or the words that is named with what it is named. That onomatopoeic words are such words which are named from the sound with what it is named. For it is the word that tries to imitate, copy, resemble the denoting sound. For example, meow. This is the word meow. Boom, bang, click. These are the words. Now what are these words doing? These words are actually trying to imitate, resemble the sound they are copying. For example, meow. The pronunciation of this word is very similar to the actual audition. Meow, the pronunciation of this word is very similar to the sound it is trying to denote. So these type of words which represent the sound, which imitate, resemble the sound it is denoting very closely, we call it onomatopoeic words. Now, with the help of these onomatopoeic words, poet evoking the auditory perception tries to give us the impression of what something sounds like. For example, I say boom. This boom, the sound of the word is very similar to the real audition, right? So what I am doing with the use of these onomatopoeic words, I am arousing, evoking the auditory perception. And by evoking the auditory perception, I am trying to give you the impression what something sounds like. So these are few of the sound devices at a poet's disposal to create the musicality, to create the music in the poetry. These sounds not only create music in the poetry, these sounds also adds to the meaning of the poetry. These sounds also contribute to the theme of the poetry. For example, there is a poem by D.H. Lawrence which goes, how beastly the bourgeois is, the male of the species. Here, what we see is our author, poet D.H. Lawrence is writing about the social class, the privileged and the underprivileged. And what he is trying to do through the poetry is, he is trying to deconstruct, dismantle, destroy the notion of bourgeois. And to do that, what he did is, rather than going and exploding the gelatin and RDX physically, he used the plosive words. How beastly the bourgeois is. See, plosive words are those words which comes with the explosion of sound, like ba, da. These words come, da. These words come with the explosion of sounds. So our poet, to bombard the notion of bourgeois, is using the explosive sound in the very first line of the poetry. D.H. Lawrence bombarded the notion of bourgeois, but he did not use RDX. Neither he used RDX nor gelatin nor any gunpowder is used there. There he used the plosive sounds to bombard in the literature. So this is how poets play with the sound. With the sound, they not only create the musicality in the poetry, rather they create the sounds add to the meaning, add to the theme of the poetry. Like in our poetry also, we see this onomatopoeic word, ding dong bell. Now there are no certain rules written on stone tablets about the sound symbolism, but still there are some rules of thumb. And according to that, plosive sounds suggest the sinister intention, devastation, destruction. This is what comes with the plosive sound. Harsh reality, death. This is the harsh reality. And this starts with the plosive sound. Destruction, bang, boom, destroy, all are associated with the plosive sounds. So plosive sound suggests us the harsh reality that is there, banging at every door. And this is how sounds contribute to the theme, meaning of the poetry. In our poetry also, we see the alliteration, we see the onomatopoeia, and this alliteration and onomatopoeia are not only creating the music in our poetry, rather they are also aiding to the theme, to the meaning of the poetry, about the poetry. Now, coming down to our poetry, after knowing about the theoretical background or the devices needed to decode the poetry, coming down to our poetry, what we discover is Our poetry is extracted, taken from a play named The Tempest. Now, what happens in the play? In the play, we have two brothers, Antonio and Prospero. Antonio is the Prospero is the Duke of Milan. And Antonio, his brother, is the most trusted brother who is carrying all the affairs, all the governance of the country. Now, this brother Antonio, with the desire to be the king himself, conspires against his own brother Prospero and decides to exile Prospero and casts Prospero and his daughter Miranda to a deserted island. Now, while Antonio is usurping his power, his brother's power, King of Naples was King Alonso, and this king did nothing in favor of Prospero. Rather, this king added Antonio to usurp Prospero. Now, in the island, Prospero and his daughter Miranda starts living. In this island dwelt a dead witch named Sycorax. Some time ago, there lived this old witch who has now died. Her name was Sycorax. And this witch has imprisoned various different spirits in the island. Now, Prospero, with his magic, frees the spirit Ariel. Many years after, and now they start dwelling in the island. Many years later, the sheep carrying King Alonso, his son Ferdinand, Antonio, and other members of the royal court passes near the island. Now, when this guy Prospero, this chap, is aware about this voyage, and with his magic, he brings the tempest, he brings the violent sea storm. With his magic added by the spirit Ariel. And in this storm, in this tempest, during the shipwreck, our Prince Ferdinand jumps off the deck into the blue water to save his life. There, Ariel saves Ferdinand from drowning. Now, as ordered by Prospero to lure Ferdinand ashore, Ariel sings two songs to Ferdinand. Our song is the second song, where Ferdinand grieves. Ferdinand is grief-stricken. Ferdinand's grieving heart mourns for his father's death. Ferdinand assumes that in the shipwreck, my father Alonso drowned, he died, but this has not happened. Ferdinand is in illusion, he just assumes so, and assuming so, Ferdinand is dejected, heartbroken, and now to console this dejected heart, to console this grieving heart, to provide solace to the mourning soul, Ariel, the invisible spirit of the air, sings the song to Ferdinand. We will check what Ariel says. What Ariel says, we will check it to borrow. For today, thank you class. Tomorrow we'll be getting into the poetry. Thank you.
Masa?